So it took me 19 days in November to finally catch up on October 2025 horror films, but here we are. Let's recap a bunch of them. Hey everybody, I'm Killjoy Jake, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. If you like talking about new horror flicks just as much as I do, then make sure to like this video and subscribe for more videos just like this one. Also, the best way to support the page is by becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter, where you'll get an extra review video each week. So if you like this video especially, become a channel member. It's pretty cool. Thank you all so much for your support. Now let's get into this. So kicking this off, this is a new series that I want to start on the page because I don't really get an opportunity to talk about all of the horror movies I get to see, opposed to the short little out of the theater reactions that you see posted to my little short section of this channel. This is an opportunity to talk about all these movies in one gigantic video, because whenever I do just separate review videos, they don't really do as well. If I'm gonna post something to this page that doesn't have the word Scream in the title, it's gonna be something spectacular like hopefully today's video is. You'll see a video just like this on all the November stuff I watched at the end of this month as well. So let's break down all of the new stuff I watched this past October. There's a lot of reasons I started this channel, but one of them is because I loved the VHS franchise so much, and I wanted to know about all the other weirdos that enjoyed watching these movies. The latest entry, VHS Halloween, which dropped right at the top of October, hits on all the bizarre things I love about the franchise, allowing filmmakers to make whatever kind of madness they'd like with whatever different tone. Everyone is calling VHS the goofiest of the entire franchise, but in reality, there's like one segment that's the goofiest of the entire franchise, one that's like the darkest of the series, one that's a total gross out, one that's a slow burn with an insane kill, and one at the end that is a unique mixture of dark and campy. Not to mention that the wraparound here, Diet Phantasma, is, in my opinion, easily the best wraparound we've ever had in this franchise. It's actually consequential, and every time we cut back to it, builds on top of what came before. I think so many of the wraparounds we're just kind of cutting back to because we have to. There's no real reason to do so. Ever since VHS 85, I feel like they've had the wraparound down. It took them 6 movies, but they are definitely there now. Ladies and gentlemen, I could talk about VHS Halloween for the rest of this video, but I have covered it to death on this page. You guys know how much I love this series. If you want to watch me talk more about VHS Halloween, I did an interview with directors Micheline Pitt Norman as well as R.H. Norman.
All anyone would say when they read the script was how ambitious it was. Which, if you're a filmmaker,
you don't want to hear that from your
producers.
It's like
a ranking video of all 42 VHS segments to date from the 8 movies, and a massive review video that producer Josh Goldblum actually retweeted. I am still so unbelievably thankful for that. He is punk rock as fuck. So check out those videos if you want to talk about my favorite eclectic horror franchise. Although it absolutely does not deliver on what its sleazy marketing campaign promised, Bone Lake still works at times as a somewhat brutal, if not predictable, thriller flick. It's not the erotic slasher film that the over-the-top poster and trailer for this movie made it out to be, which I know a lot of folks were disappointed by. I think had Bone Lake actually been that movie, this would have been way more successful and might have hit with audiences a lot more than it did. I mean, think about it, we're living in the age where Terrifier 3, just last fall, broke records and became the highest grossing unrated horror film to ever hit theaters. Bone Lake should have been that as an erotic slasher film. Obviously, that's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to see naked people on screen getting killed by some crazy slasher villain. I totally understand that. But some people do. Some people miss movies like the original run of Friday the 13th. With how scarce that kind of movie is in the modern box office, I think something like that, an unrated slasher movie that features a ton of nudity, that's like their big thing that they're trying to sell, would have dominated at the box office. Being real here, in the 2020s, cinema is kind of dying. People don't want to go out to the theaters anymore, not only because it's super expensive, but I think a lot of us got comfortable staying home watching movies on streaming, and that's totally understandable. If you're gonna make people show up to the theaters, though, it's gotta be something worthwhile, something they've never seen in a theater before. I think that was part of the fun of going to see Terrifier 3. I have never ever in my life seen that type of brutality at my local cinema. You would think Bone Lake would deliver on that considering its egregious title. Sadly, this just ends up being a bit of a run-of-the-mill psychological horror with a slightly predictable twist. The best part of this movie is easily the opening scene, however, that will make every testicle-having person watching this right now want to throw up in their popcorn. My balls hurt just thinking about it. If you want some gory kills, I have to admit Bone Lake definitely delivers on that, but it is just not the movie I thought it was going to be. A product that would have been certainly way better than this. Good Boy was clearly a very difficult movie to make. Honestly, my favorite part of going to the theater and seeing this one was watching the behind-the-scenes making of little documentary that they shot. The movie stars the world's cutest dog, Indy the dog, who is actually director Ben Leonberg's, and you watch from his perspective as you see his owner get terrorized by what we think are ghosts. I want to preface this by saying I have the utmost respect for literally everybody that worked on this project. Casting a dog in the lead role of what is your feature film debut is not an easy thing to do. That takes balls, and I'm not talking about the ones that got shot with an arrow in the previous review. Although I totally dig the setup for this movie, I just think this movie completely shoots itself in the foot with its downer plotline that focuses on a character that I just simply cannot love. I'm not talking about the dog, of course. I'm talking about his owner, who abuses him at a certain point in this film. Good Boy is begging you to feel bad for this faceless Charlie Brown owner character who, about halfway through the film, hits Indy the dog. As an animal lover, the fastest way for me to emotionally check out of a character is to show them doing something like this. See, I can get behind somebody like Jason Voorhees, who is killing a bunch of dumb teenagers, but when it comes to hitting an animal, I cannot root for somebody like that. I cannot be sad for somebody like that. And this entire movie hinges on that specifically. I think this movie is trying to showcase like a complicated character who is dying and who is slowly deteriorating from the inside out. With that being said, however, I think this movie would have worked a lot better had I actually cared about the character and he was still dying of a terrible illness. And that could have been represented by these like ghosts who are floating around the house the entire time. The product as it stands just comes off as incredibly pretentious to me and completely fails with its emotional element. With all of that being said though, there is a lot of great filmmaking chops on display here, and I look forward to whatever Ben Leonberg works on next. I remember when this movie got announced and I was rolling my eyes because it just sounded like Blumhouse mining more of its popular IP. I never needed a sequel to the original Black Phone. That is such an open and shut case. However, I am really glad that we got this one. We catch up with Finney and Gwen in Black Phone 2 about 5 years later after the events of the original. Gwen starts having dreams about the grabber again that leads her and her group of friends to Alpine Lake Youth Camp. At this frosty setting, they not only face off against a dream demon supernatural version of the grabber who has somehow come back, but also uncover a terrifying connection between the serial killer and their gruesome family history. One of the biggest things that works about this one is reinventing the grabber as a more grounded and disturbing version of Freddy Krueger. Every dream sequence here with Scott Derrickson's iconic Super 8 footage is beautifully warped and terrifying. The score by his son, Atticus Derrickson, is haunting yet nostalgic. I also think it's a nice touch that this movie feels more 80s where the original had a 70s flair. So much works here about this surprisingly fantastic sequel, but there are a few blemishes here and there. The characterization of Gwen in this film oddly does not work for me, and a lot of the emotional moments fall flat because of that. The original Black Phone almost brought me to tears at the end when the family reunites. It's like every other problem they had washed away because they were just so thankful to be together again. Black Phone 2 tried to do some of that here as well, but it just did not work for me as well as it did in the original film. I think that Finney was a much stronger character this time around, dealing with trauma in kind of a toxic way. Gwen, however, is still acting like that little girl we saw in the first movie. I wish there was just a little more effort here to transform this character, just like how they did with Finney. We repeat the whole asking God for things joke in this movie, and I just don't feel like it works. That is in no way a testament to Madeline McGraw's ability. She is absolutely killing it in this flick with her performance, however. It's more so the writing that I'm not crazy about there. To that point, I think the very best scene in all of Black Phone 2 is during the dream sequence where the grabber does a kindness for Gwen, as he calls it. The drama in the conversation in the back of the van is probably my favorite part of this entire film, hands down. This movie is also gorgeously shot with a frozen over summer camp vibe to it that I just loved. You're kind of getting the best of Freddy and Jason here in a weird way. If you haven't seen this one yet, you liked the original, and you also love 80s slashers, I think you absolutely have to give this one a watch. We're also hearing rumblings of a Black Phone 3 potentially on the way. Scott Derrickson, bring it on, baby. Brian Bertino is such an underrated director. He has made some incredible stuff across his career, including The Strangers from 2008, as well as more recently, The Dark and the Wicked. This is potentially one of the most underrated horror films of the decade. It is terrifying, it has an emotional story at its core, it is genuinely one of the best, maybe at least supernatural horror flicks that I think has released in recent memory. Bertino's new flick Vicious here captures a lot of the same energy as his previous works, both The Strangers and even more so Dark Mark and the Wicked. Unfortunately though, I feel like this one hits some ditches pretty early on. It's kind of like an evil version of A Christmas Carol, even being set on the holiday, and does feature some harrowing performances from its main characters. Dakota Fanning puts herself through some of the very worst body horror of the year, ouch, and Kathryn Hunter delivers a chilling monologue at the beginning of this one. Vicious certainly has its issues, but it is way better than the last Kathryn Hunter horror movie, The Front Room. That was an Emmy-double-S mess. This is definitely a much better horror film, however, and I'm glad that Kathryn Hunter is on full display here. Her and Brandy were carrying The Front Room on their backs, and once again, Kathryn Hunter delivers an excellent performance here that I just think is terrifying. The way her voice sounds, it's so unique. I love it. Biggest problem with this movie by far, though, is that it is way too damn long. I think it's like an hour 48, hour 47, and I think it should have been maybe a little under 90 minutes with how much meandering is done at this one single location for most of the movie. It really slows down the pacing, and when something crazy isn't happening, it's hard not to look at your phone. If you're patient, Vicious is absolutely worth a watch for its peaks, but unfortunately it does have some valleys as well. The film is perfectly titled though. This is certainly a vicious and mean-spirited horror film, so if you're into that, I would recommend it. Just like Brian Bertino, I feel like David Moreau is another director who is a bit undersung. He's responsible for the simple yet effective Them from 2006, as well as last year's horror hit Mads, a movie that just barely crept up onto my top 10 horror films of last year. I loved Mads for being this fast-paced one take that showcases a viral infection in real time. After that incredibly impressive feat, I was ready for whatever this guy had cooking up next. Other is definitely a different animal, taking on a much more slow burn approach with slightly less effective results. This is another mixed bag of a Shudder original, but man does it have some killer scenes. I kind of feel the same way about Other as I do Vicious, honestly. The opening scene that establishes the story is wonderfully shot, with these flashing red lights during a home security alarm that's going off. Learning about our main character's backstory via VHS tapes was traumatic, and the ending is so hauntingly wholesome it almost feels like a deleted subplot of 28 years later. Definitely a lot of scary shit going on in this one, with a slightly inconsistent pace. Still a pretty good watch for my slow burn lovers out there though. Oh, Del Toro's Frankenstein, have I been waiting so long for you. Frankenstein 2025 follows a brilliant but egotistical scientist who brings a monstrous creature to life in a daring experiment that ultimately leads to the undoing of both the creator and his tragic creation. It's a much more faithful adaptation of the Mary Shelley novel, but set up in a more Lovecraftian format, with Victor and the monster telling their tale on the ship. I really enjoyed this one for its incredible visuals, spectacular performances across the board, and epic feel. Look, when you have a cast list that features Oscar Isaac, Mia Goth, and Christoph Waltz, you're going to get top shelf performances. But I have to admit, Jacob Elordi as the creature may have stolen the show for me personally. The creature's tale is without a doubt my absolute favorite part of this entire film. That was harrowing, and I think captures that tragic energy that you want from Frankenstein so well. There's so much to love about this movie, but I think his complicated relationship with the blind man was my favorite part. I know some folks are not going to like how digital this movie looks, but that doesn't undermine the killer practicals of this movie by any means either. I was really loving the way that this one looks. I've seriously come around to digital effects as now I've seen them done well versus not done well. And it's kind of the same thing with practical effects. When they're done well, they're awesome, but when they're not done well, they also suck. I kind of feel the same way about VFX and CGI these days. It's an art form. Like I was saying, this is a very faithful rendition of Mary Shelley's story, with a few creative liberties taken here and there, of course. But some may be disappointed that it sticks too close to the source material. We have to remember that the James Whale classic from 1931 is an amazing movie without a doubt, but it is based on a play that is then based on the Mary Shelley novel. It also takes a lot of liberties taken across all those different things, right? Did you know that there's not a single mention of electricity being used to bring the monster to life in the original novel? That's something that was created for the 1931 movie. Obviously, that's still a factor here, utilizing Bernie Wrightson's wonderful illustrations that served as a key inspiration for this film's look. But Del Toro's Frankenstein is without a doubt the best version of this story that's actually based on the Mary Shelley novel. No one's saying the James Whale movie isn't a classic. Dude, that's an old movie that still holds up today. I might even like Bride better too, which is crazy. Both of those movies, if they came out today, would still be loved by modern audiences. I mean, that's super impressive. I think Del Toro hits on all of the themes from the novel, maybe putting them a little too upfront at times. There are literal lines from characters who are referencing the Prometheus story, and it kind of gets a little cheeseball at times for me. movie. Christoph Waltz at one point literally exclaims, "I want to be the eagle that picks at your liver," and it's a little on the nose. But I think where this movie deviates ever so slightly is there's a little more of a focus on nature versus nurture. This is done in a much more subtle way that I feel was a little more effective. We spend a lot of time at the beginning of this movie focusing on Victor and his father's cruel relationship. That translates into a similar relationship with Victor and his own creation later on. This was a really thought-provoking element of the story that Del Toro highlights a little more here. This version of Frankenstein is very comparable to Robert Eggers' reimagining of Nosferatu from last year, kind of for that reason. Eggers was faithful to the story of the original movie, but attempted new methods to scare, a whole new design for the monster, and balanced the themes in different ways than its predecessor. With that last point there, 2024's Nosferatu focuses so much more on the sexual repression of women during this time period. That was only really a small part of the original Nosferatu. That is, in my opinion, what makes it such a massive footnote in that series' legacy. Frankenstein 2025 finds something similar with its more subtle focus on fatherhood, but maybe not hitting the same strides as the Eggers flick, which I have to admit I think I liked just a little bit more than this. To clarify, that does not mean I disliked this film. I think Frankenstein 2025 is easily one of the best movies from this year, like without a doubt. Dude, Del Toro has basically been trying to make this project happen since 2008. That commitment is very much so on display here. With this movie being less of a horror flick and more of a gothic epic, you could argue that this is the way the story was always meant to be told. The first two episodes of It Welcome to Derry were shockingly great. I had pretty low expectations for this series with its made-for-TV look and lack of a certain killer clown for the majority of the season, but thankfully this one kicks off an exciting new story. We're not only exploring the new monsters that this shapeshifter can transform into, but also showing the previous losers clubs that went up against this thing and failed. That's established pretty immediately in episode 1. I also love a lot of the new characters and subplots. If it's exploring the history of the Hanlon family or the connections to the other Stephen King stories being set up here. One character is currently on his way to Shawshank Reformatory, while another may be going to the Overlook Hotel. This show is everything that Castle Rock wishes it was. We haven't seen Pennywise yet, and I think episodes 3 and 4 kind of slow down a little bit. We'll talk more about those in the next rendition of this video series, but Welcome to Derry is off to a very good start, and so far I'm mostly loving season 1. Whew, I hate to end this video on such a sour note, but the latest Hell House movie is a major dud. Dropping the found footage framing to focus on a meandering story without any effective scares was a wild choice. I really don't mean for this next point to come off as rude, but I just don't feel like this movie was written in a very intriguing way. It feels like a bunch of scenes with the same characters just loosely pieced together, versus a consequential story where one scene flows into the next. Also, there's like no effective scares in this movie. What happened? This was a really surprisingly bad entry in the franchise, which I feel like was just picking up steam again with Carmichael Manor, the 4th entry from a few years ago. That was probably the best sequel. This one was probably the worst. So what do you guys think about these horror movies and TV shows? Let me know down in the comments below. Also, let me know what you guys want me to watch this month for my next video, kind of doing something similar to this. I can guarantee that that next video will feature a review on the Creep Tapes, Keeper, the rest of the It Welcome to Derry episodes, and also whatever else y'all suggest. Thank you all so much for watching. Please subscribe, and as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.